Cemeteries, the place where you lay your loved ones to rest. But sometimes those loved ones do not stay asleep. Welcome to Spooky Tales of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Hello and welcome. I'm Jennifer. You might have noticed that I did not do a episode last week. So I was like, it was very hot in Forks. It was like blistering hot, and I spent 99% of my time in a pool instead of doing any sort of research. And the episode that I was gonna do yesterday or last week, excuse me, is more intensive than the research was a lot more than I thought it was gonna be. So that is going to be a different episode. So today we're going to talk about haunted cemeteries instead of what we were going to talk about last week. The weather is much more palatable this weekend, so I've had time to do the things I needed to do to make sure that this episode gets out. Also, I think I just needed a little bit of downtime. I mean, I do a lot of things, so I this was kind of put on the back burner last week. So, but from here out, I'll let you know if we're going to take any kind of breaks or anything like that. I am starting another master's program in a couple weeks, so I might end up taking a couple weeks off and not having any episodes, but we'll see how it goes by the time I get there. So without further ado, we are doing the episode on haunted cemeteries. Today we are going to talk about Black Diamond Cemetery, which is located in Washington State, and it's pretty close to Seattle. So Black Diamond Cemetery is located near Seattle, Washington, and is in a very small town called Black Diamond. Black Diamond is known for its diversity with people from several different countries like Italy, Russia, and Australia. I don't know how diverse people from like the whitest countries in the world can be, but that's what the research says. The Black Diamond Coal Mining Company was actually established in California before it moved up to Washington State. And that was in the late 1800s. I think it was like 1884, 1885. So they actually established 3 different towns in California and a wharf in the Bay Area before they moved to Oregon and then subsequently to Washington. Because the mines in Washington produced higher quality coal than in Oregon and California, it didn't take very long for everybody to move from those 2 areas up to Washington. Black Diamond, my notes are backwards again. The California mines were closed and everyone moved up north. As I said, it was a pretty productive mine. It brought in around 700 to 800 tons a day, and that was by 1904, and that's a lot. Like that's a lot. People came from all over Europe. Like I said, like the whitest places in Europe you could possibly freaking imagine came to Washington. I feel like I have the right to say that because like I am predominantly like the whitest person you will ever meet. Like I did a DNA test and everything like that, and I come from the whitest countries in the world. So people from Wales, Italy, Ireland, some from Germany, Russia, and Australia all came to Black Diamond for work. The place was pretty prosperous for the time. Before that, the decline of coal, which was actually not long into the 1900s. I think it said like 1930s is when coal started declining in the United States. When the mine started failing, it was sold to the Pacific Coast Company, who eventually closed the mine for good. The cemetery at Black Diamond was established in 1884 when the town was, and was primarily the graveyard for the miners and their families. It was both a company and a community cemetery, though, and there were regular citizens who were also buried in it. The cemetery covers about 3.5 acres and has around 1,200 grave sites. The cemetery was added to the National Registry of Historic Places in April of 2000. Many of the immigrants coming to find work and Black Diamond came to be buried in this cemetery. And one of the graves actually holds the bodies of 8 separate miners who were killed in the Lawson mine explosion in 1910. I would imagine that there's more mass graves in like conjunction with stuff like mining and logging and, you know, early logging and things like that than you would imagine, just because of the scope of accidents that can happen. I mean, like, even to this day, logging and mining are some of like the most dangerous occupations you can have in the world. Let's see, where was I at? And they did, and it is said that at least one of the people buried in the Black Diamond Cemetery was a Civil War veteran. Several children that died from influenza and smallpox epidemics in the early 1900s are also said to have been buried there. The cemetery required a graveyard fee to be deducted from the miners' paychecks, and this graveyard fee actually assisted with the upkeep of the graveyard. So it wasn't like I feel like when you say like there was a graveyard fee, you know, deducted from they had to pay for their plots or whatever, but it didn't really say that they had to pay for their plots out of their own paychecks, but it just kind of like sounded like what they were doing was just basically paying for like the, you know, like gardeners to come in and make sure that the plots were in tip-top shape and the grass was mowed and the trees were taken care of and the tombstones were taken care of and that kind of stuff. So I guess it does make a little bit of sense. It's kind of macabre and macabre, and there's that I learned how to say words from reading them situation that I find myself in sometimes. Macabre and a little bit morbid to have to pay for, you know, the upkeep of a cemetery out of your paycheck. So the cemetery is actually known for being quite strange and very spooky, as many cemeteries are, but Black Diamond is strangely hidden from public view by tree rows and very thick vegetation. And this actually only just leads to the viewpoint that it is extra spooky and extra strange. Some say that Black Diamond Cemetery is haunted by the spirits of the many ghosts of the miners who died there. There have been many witnesses who claim to see strange floating lights in the cemetery on foggy nights. They're also said to resemble lanterns, and those who see them say that they are the ghosts of deceased miners still looking for coal. I have heard this in several different podcasts that I listen to, and it would just absolutely suck if you were no longer on this mortal coil and the very last thing that you ever are going to do for the rest of your eternal soul's lifetime is fucking work. I think that is terrible, but I guess in a way it's not at the same time, because they are doing something quite familiar to them. But I feel like working for your the eternity of your soul is like, I would rather be like watching butterflies and the sunrise and like playing with ghost horses and stuff like that than working for the rest of my fucking soul's life. Thanks. But I digress. Here we go. Some do attribute the lights to natural gases or something called will-o'-the-wisp. These phenomenon is actually caused by swamp gases that are combusting and creating a very cool, nifty little blue flame. I will post let's see if I can find an image of a will-o'-wisp online. I will post it in the Instagram. Cases of these will-o'-the-wisp phenomenons have been documented in wetlands all over the world. Sightings of fairies, ghosts, and floating orbs seen in these swampy wetlands have all been attributed to these will-o'-the-wisps phenomenons. I don't know. I've never seen like swamp gas igniting, but I always hear that when people see floating glowing things in swampy type areas, they always are every skeptic you ever will meet will say that it's swamp gas igniting. How it ignites, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but maybe I'll figure it out and explain it a little in the Instagram or something. Local legend also says that a ghost of a very white horse can be seen in the graveyard. They say this horse appears at night and has a white aura that glows. Because of the very rural area of Black Diamond, it's not unheard of to see horses just wandering the fuck around, because horses are rotten to the core and they like to escape and will go wherever the fuck they want. They don't care. As long as they can eat grass, they don't care. My dog is in here right now and I'm loving on her, and she seems to be enjoying listening to me rant about horses, because I have two, and yes, occasionally they like to escape and then they're jackasses and don't ever let me catch them because they're rude. Anyway, however, the cemetery is surrounded by a chain link fence, so a dog getting inside, a horse getting inside the cemetery would be kind of difficult. So maybe the horse, they think, might have belonged to somebody who was laid to rest in the cemetery, and that particular horse has stayed by its owner's side even in death. And horses can be pretty loyal, so I would believe it. Some of the other strange things that have been said to happen in Black Diamond, I don't even know what I just said, but I don't think it was correct. So other strange things have been said to have happened in Black Diamond. People have said to have heard disembodied voices coming from certain graves, including whistling. Whistling at night is creepy as shit. Some say that all of these strange things are the ghosts of the miners, and the miners apparently they think that the miners like to spook the visitors who come to Black Diamond Cemetery. Black Diamond has been the subject of some paranormal investigations. It was the subject of investigation by Cascadia Paranormal Investigations. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of my coffee, sorry. It's in the morning time right now, so I am drinking coffee. The Cascadia Paranormal Investigations attempted to debunk some of the claims that they couldn't find, but they couldn't find anything conclusive. They did find that flash photography can cause reflections on the tombstones at night, and sometimes airborne particles like dust mites and stuff like that, and even occasionally bugs that fly, can also resemble floating orbs in flash. The whistling could be explained by the wind blowing through the trees, and the horse could, like I said, very well be an animal that has escaped its enclosure, because horses are jackasses and rude jerks and like to escape all of the time. The CPI did use things to help them gather evidence, like they used an ovilus, which is a type of spirit box and is used to communicate with ghosts, and they did actually get some responses. They were able to read EMFs, and they were able to pick up some words that were they said they were pretty rather violent. I'm assuming like threats of harm and stuff like that, or maybe they were just cursing the investigators out, like one of my other episodes found. They were getting cursed out by the ghosts, which okay, I don't blame them. Some of the CPI crew members said that they saw some apparitions, and they all felt like they were being closely watched by something unknown. So that was the tale of the Black Diamond Cemetery, located in Black Diamond, Washington, which is a couple hours outside of Seattle. I can't remember if it was north or south or east or whatever. If you go west, you're going to go into the Puget Sound. So let's not do that. We only have I'm only doing two cemeteries today. I tried to find some cemeteries that were like in Idaho and Oregon, but I really couldn't find a whole lot of information about them, which I kind of wish I had like just written down what I had found for some of them, but I didn't, and I chose to only do these two. So the next one is El Campo Santo, which is located in San Diego, California. El Campo Santo is one of the smallest cemeteries in California, and it only covers about a half an acre. It's mostly comprised of white wooden crosses. Certain plots are surrounded by picket fences, and there is a low brick wall that lines its perimeter. El Campo Santo was built in 1849 and is right around the corner from the infamous Whaley House. So I've never heard of the Whaley House, and I did when I was doing the research for El Campo. I did find some pretty interesting things about Whaley House, so I'm probably going to do an episode on that. Anyway, so El Campo Santo was actually much larger than it is now, but many of the residents of San Diego's pre-industrial era were buried, and I'm sorry, many of the residents of San Diego's pre-industrial era were buried in a lot of the graves in El Campo. But a lot of these graves that were in the former areas of El Campo Santo, which El Campo Santo means the holy field in Spanish, by the way. A lot of the plots in the burial sites and the grave sites and stuff were actually covered over by roads and sidewalks and housing projects as the city started to expand. This is not something that is really uncommon, but most of the time when people are taking, like land from a cemetery to develop on it, what they usually do is they will disinter bodies and move them to new areas and new different cemeteries and stuff like that. So in El Campo, they did not do that. So a lot of the sidewalks in San Diego around this area where El Campo is, they just built on top of the graves, which is like the epitome of desecration, in my opinion. Like that's terrible. Like for me, that's awful. And you wonder why some of this stuff was happening. Sorry for that little pause. My dog was in my bedroom eating my cat food and she had to be told to get out. Anyway, so let's continue. The cemetery is considered a historical landmark and is considered one of San Diego's most haunted locations. The incidents that occur in El Campo Santo seem to prove all of these theories and incidences. One of the ghosts that's said to haunt El Campo Santo is James Yankee Jim Robinson. James Robinson, and from here on out, I'll probably just call him Yankee Jim because it's much easier to say, was a pretty terrible person. And there is an article in the Los Angeles Herald from October 1873, that actually tells that Yankee Jim, James Grayson Loring, and William Harris were a couple of really disagreeable guys who got together and kind of like did bad things. In 1852, who they all came from the mining camps around San Diego and stuff like that. There's a lot of different mines up there. Maybe one of these days we'll do another haunted mines and do California. Someone did point out in the community that Yankee Jim was extremely dangerous. And apparently he would hang around the camps, the mining camps, waiting for unsuspecting miners, and would actually murder them after robbing them of all of their gold and like personal effects. And he would do that. And apparently maybe this is how he made his like living. I don't know, but that's pretty freaking horrible. But apparently he was told that as long as he behaved in San Diego, he could go around and doing whatever he wanted, like walking down the street, etc., which is wild to me, but whatever. He was a pretty large man, and it's said that he stood about 6'3" or 6'4" and was very heavily built. He also was shunned by all of the respectable, quote unquote, people in the town at the time. At some point, Yankee Jim stole a boat belonging to Joseph Stewart and Enos Wall. The boat was found a few miles down the coast, washed up on shore. That theft would actually lead to Jim's eventual hanging on the Whaley House property. So there is another reason why we're going to do an episode on the Whaley House. My dog is in here again and she looks very forlorn because she got in trouble for stealing cat food. There have been many and various sightings in and around El Campo Santo. There are unexplained intermittent power outages around the area. Alarms, I'm assuming they're like business alarms or house alarms, go on and off all of the time. Surrounding homes and businesses have randomly flickering lights, and their appliances will go on and off. Car alarms will also randomly go off if people are parked too close to the cemetery. And people who park too close to the cemetery also might have a harder time restarting their cars. How obnoxious would that be if every time you parked just a smidge too close to the cemetery, your car wouldn't start? I would be very annoyed by that. There have been quite a few apparitions that have been, I talked a little loud there, sorry. There have also been some apparitions that have been seen around El Campo Santo. Most can be seen gliding around wearing 19th century clothing, which makes sense considering the era that they were in. Most of this stuff takes place in the Victorian era, which is late 1800s, early 1900s. Most of the spirits are said to be the workmen in and around the area who make up most of the bodies that are buried in El Campo Santo. Extreme drops in temperatures are also reported and are usually accompanied by flashing lights or orbs. People have claimed that these cold spots are like walking into a freezer. Sometimes people are said to mistake these apparitions for park employees, but when they try to talk to these quote unquote employees, they actually just vanish right in front of their eyes. So that's terrifying. One apparition that's said to be seen is one that's only an upper torso. So we can probably assume how this apparition died if it's only just an upper torso floating around. And if you don't know what an upper torso is, it's from your hips up, and it's like your arms and shoulders and chest area and part of your stomach. Tourists who've taken pictures at the cemetery have later found different things throughout the pictures, and all of these things that they find in their pictures were not there when they took the pictures. There have also been reports of a woman wearing a white Victorian era dress that's seen along the south wall. And when anyone tries to make contact with her, she just simply vanishes. I'm telling you, if you see an apparition and it just vanishes, I'm probably going to leave. If something like that happened to me, I'm probably just going to have to nope right on out of there. I mean, like I've said it many times, I think doing a ghost tour or going on a ghost hunt would be absolutely the fucking balls. Like, it would be so much fun. But I know as soon as I ever had to experience something like an actual apparition or like maybe something touching me, I would probably leave. Like I'm pretty sure I would leave. Like I don't think I could handle staying there. So more power to the people who do these kinds of things and have this kind of stuff happen to them and stick it out until the end. So anyway, that's welcome to my TED Talk. There's also been reports of a indigenous man that floats above the ground about an inch or so that's been seen. There's some debate about whether he's an indigenous man or a man from Mexico. It could be either. I mean, there's huge populations of indigenous in Mexico, so maybe it's an indigenous Mexican man. I'm not quite sure, but his identity is pretty unknown. Yankee Jim Robinson is also said to haunt El Campo Santo. He is apparently buried in El Campo. And there are overwhelming sensations are said to just grab people when they wander around his grave. And I'm assuming like emotional responses, physical responses, like goose pimples and all that kind of stuff are happening when people walk around their grave. They also say to see a very tall and a very dark apparition around his grave. And it's theorized that this apparition is actually Yankee Jim. So I would be very scared to see a tall, dark, terrifying person around a grave. Like that is like a shadow. I don't want to see shadow people, okay? Shadow people is like the freakiest thing for me. In 1996, the people around El Campo Santo said that it got so bad that they got together to see if anything could be done about the hauntings. They actually all decided that they would hire a priest and have a priest come and perform an exorcism, which more power to you, but I'm not quite sure. One of these days, we'll get into the whole, like, I'll do an episode on exorcisms and the theology on that, but today is not that day. I have opinions about exorcisms. Anyway, so they paid for the exorcism to be performed over the entire cemetery, and they did notice that some of the activity started to drop off after the exorcism, which is kind of wild to me. Maybe people were just mad that somebody came in with a Catholic priest and was doing hoo-hoo, like praying and stuff like that over them, and maybe they weren't Catholic. I don't know. Along the sidewalks around the former parts of El Campo Santo that were built upon, they actually they have placed small metallic discs that read gravesite. I don't think that there's names on the disc. I'll have to look at them again. But there is some recognition, for the fact that there are people buried under the sidewalks. That weren't supposed to be having sidewalks built on top of them, but it is what it is. Some people think that between this and the exorcism, it appeased some kind of thing between the spirits, and some people did believe that some of these activities were demonic in nature. So they think that the exorcism appeased some of the spirits and drove away some of the demonic activity. And the hauntings actually have become less frequent since 1996. But that could just be because maybe not as many people are experiencing things that they did before. Or maybe the ghosts just decided that they didn't appreciate the exorcism and only come out when people aren't around. Who knows? San Diego and El Campo still draw dozens of paranormal investigators and ghost hunters every single year. I'm not surprised by that. Apparently San Diego is extremely haunted, and maybe one of these days, we'll do some more California stories and stuff. Because California is pretty vast. It's a rather large, state and has a lot of people in it. But yeah, so that's Haunted Cemeteries with me, Jennifer, your host, and spooky tales from the Pacific Northwest and beyond. So we do have an Instagram, and our Instagram is at Spooky PNW Podcast. I am still, wanting people to send in ghost stories that they've experienced, or maybe they have a family tale that, like a legend or a history or something. You can email that to me at spookypnwpod@gmail.com, or you can send it in as a DM on Instagram. I was thinking about making a TikTok for the podcast, but I'm not quite sure yet. We'll see what happens. You can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Music, and Apple Podcasts. I am still getting that Patreon set up, so stay tuned for that. Enjoy your weekend, or I hope you enjoyed your weekend, because this will be coming out a couple days after I record it. So enjoy the weather, enjoy your weekends, keep it spooky, stay hydrated, that kind of stuff. Have a great day. Thanks for coming. Bye. I don't know why I said bye, but